everybody today. For those of you that are newbies or returnees or old-timers, we're glad to have y'all. Just a few house cleaning things. October 4th and 5th, we're doing Walk Through the Cemetery at the City of Douglas. We have several portrayals. We're going to focus on the family of a murderer. And so that will convicted life imprisonment. So that will be interesting. Tickets will be $10. They'll go on sale the week after Labor Day. And it's Friday at 6 with a reception at 7 at the museum, or Saturday morning at 10, and you don't get any food or beverage. So take your pick, take your pick. Rain or shine, snow, hail, it don't matter. We're going to do it in the rain with an umbrella or whatever.
Are you going to have a cart there for people to ride?
We don't know. I haven't got that situated yet. But this year we're not walking as far, and we do have what I call the rolling seats, the walkers that have seats in them.
Oh, okay.
So we'll have some of those there. I'm not sure about the cart. Since Henry's retired, I'm not sure I can depend on the rest of them. So, but anyway, for those of you who can't stand or whatever, we'll have you covered. September the 16th, mark your calendar, from 10 a.m. to noon, we're having the American Legion Centennial Celebration Acknowledgement here at the museum. Beverages, we're not doing a 2-hour program, we're just want everybody to come and see and do and meet and greet. Because the American Legion in Coffee County does an awful lot for this community. And I thought it was time we at least recognize them in some less structured manner. Okay. So mark that on your calendar. I'm not going to get that far ahead. I will tell you that in September, Mr. Frankie Snow will be here to talk about the Broxton Rocks at the next History at High Noon. And he's coming with slides and all this stuff. I'm not going to be that gracious with you today. Johnny, your mic's doing bad. We're going to talk a little bit about history and education in Coffee County. And we're going to go way back. And we're going to end about 1955, which was, we were babies. But anyway, there was a lot of things that happened that some of it I didn't even realize until I started doing research again after the first time I did this little talk at the History at High Noon at Satilla Regional Library about 4 years ago. So we're going to start with that. And education to start with was a hit and miss prospect in this area of the county, or the state rather. Even the city of Douglas, which was really not a city, you didn't have any organized schools. Families, churches, communities, they organized schools. It was not owned by the city because there was no city in 1854. It was just a little hamlet. But places like Broxton, Ambrose, West Green, Nichols, they all had schools, but they were in a church if they had them. But even more so than that, you had families that wouldn't send their kids to school because they needed them to work on the farm. So there's big gaps in education at that area. Another thing about those earlier schools, everybody didn't use the same textbook. Everybody wasn't learning the same thing. Everybody didn't have the same resources. One of the schools at West Green had no heat and no well in the 1870s. All the rest of them did. There were 8 in West Green at one time. But one of them had nothing but a building. So schools, when you talk about early education, is my concept, excuse me, I'm going to be ugly, is the old homeschool concept. Mom will teach you what she can, when she can, if she can get to it. And women work really hard from daylight to dark and after. So there wasn't a lot of education as we think of it. They learned a lot, but it wasn't book learning. And what I found interesting was it was reading and writing and very little math. And when I talked to one of the guys at Telfair County Historical Society, what he said, unless you were educated, you couldn't figure. you could guesstimate, but you couldn't figure with numbers. And I never thought about it just that way. If you wanted $1 for this, you got $1 for this, but you didn't do like $1 a pound because you didn't know what that was or didn't understand it. Teachers, a lot of you in here are teachers. The people that were teaching in the very beginning were failures. They had failed at something else or couldn't find anything else they were capable of doing. And I speak from experience. My great-great-granddaddy got put off of a riverboat in Appling County because he had yellow fever. He was an educated man from Maryland with a wanderlust. And when he got better, this family nursed him back to health. The only thing he could find to do, because he'd always been on the water in a boat, was to teach school. And that's what he did till he I guess, saw the light and became a Methodist minister. But anyway, you had to hunt something. You had to find something to do. A lot of ladies that did not have family to support them anymore or did not have a husband to support them, they would board and teach. They got paid for 3 months of school in the beginning. And they'll say, at West Green, the county was saying in the early 1900s, school lasts 6 months. Well, sometimes it did and sometimes it didn't. There were no rules or guidelines. So you did what you did when you wanted to do it. Okay? And the schools were the hub of the community. Didn't matter if you had 8, 1, or 10. Everybody in that area gathered. In 1877, the state of Georgia funded Common Core schools. Not the Common Core we know, God forbid. But that meant grades 1 through 7, they did a school system, and this was going to be everybody in the state. And the state was going to fund it. Anybody that has worked for the state in education knows that's an iffy project in a good day. In 1877, it was almost a miracle. J. Monroe Wilcox was the first Coffee County School commissioner. That's the one who kind of oversaw everything. There was no retribution or accountability. It was just, this is what we're going to do to the best of our ability. Okay? In 1877. In 1900, Coffee County was the largest county in the state land-wise. They had 80 white schools and 40 colored, and the state sent the county $8,000 for 120 schools. See, I'm not very good at math either. In 1895, though, what I found unusual, Nichols was founded in 1895, but before that it was the Meeks Settlement. They had 3 schools in that area. Kirkland, Gertman, and Henson. There's more than one Kirkland school in Coffee County. So I've often wondered now, how did they know which one? Almost everybody, like the Tanners that had a sawmill and turpentine mills and all this, they had little schools on their property. Very few blacks got that opportunity. Very few. In 1900, by legislative act, the city of Douglas became a separate school system. Okay, remember that. In 1900, the city of Douglas withdrew from the county and became a city school system. Not long after that, Broxton and Nichols did the same thing. Okay? In 1905, in the county, there were 80 schools, and the state sent them $12,113. There were 6 schools in West Green in 1907, and there was 180 students. I use West Green because I've done more research in that community when we were working on the book than I did the others. And some folks don't want to share your information. But in Douglas, about that time in 1906, the 11th District Ag and Mechanical School moved from Abbeville. And the reason I mention this when they were looking for a place to build a school, they just didn't come in and buy the land and do it. Pretty much like shopping centers do today, they shopped around. The city of Douglas and B.H. Peterson gave them 300 acres of land, $52,000 in 1906, and the city gave them 10 years of free lights and water. So this is nothing new. They've done it ever since time began. In 1908, Georgia Normal College moved from Abbeville to Douglas. What this did was build up Douglas because you had people living in Douglas, boarding in Douglas, and spending money in Douglas. That's just one page, folks. Lean back. 1911, the state said counties can levy school taxes. 1911. Before that, like West Green, the people had raised money for whatever they wanted, but they couldn't tax them. But in 1911, they could tax as a county system. Constitutional limit for school tax was 5 mills. Constitutional limit. They could not go over. Now, I want to say, this brings up another research question for me. When did they change that? That's my next research, unless Mr. Trowell knows it already. There were no high schools in Coffee County at that time. There were 5 tax districts: Ambrose, Broxton, Nichols, Pearson, and West Green. And there were 2 schools on the line, Lax and Temperance. So there were a lot of schools, but there were no high schools. Now we get to Rosenwald. This is something that I found out about a year ago. Julius Rosenwald was one of the owners of Sears and Roebuck and Company. He was a German Jew. He was a philanthropist before Vanderbilt got scared of going to hell and decided to do it. He gave to Jewish charities, universities, colleges, and he went in cooperation with, through his foundation, the Rosenwald Foundation, with Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee Institute. They became so close that Mr. Rosenwald was on the board of trustees at Tuskegee. They built black schools in the South, not just in the South, but also from Maryland to Texas, Kentucky, all the way across. Because black schools were underfunded. They didn't care if the black kids got an education. The parents didn't care because they didn't know. It was just the same old cycle over and over. And Rosenthal wanted to stop this. So he set up a foundation, worked with Mr. Washington, and they built 4,977 schools in 13 states, 133 shop buildings, and 217 teachers' homes. And for the first few years, from like 1912 to 1920, everything in this area was handled by the Tuskegee Institute. I do not know exactly, but according to Fisk University records, Mr. Rosenwald fell out with Mr. Washington about the management of the program and his money, Rosenwald's money. So at that time, the building of the Rosenwald schools was moved to the Rosenwald Foundation. There's too many roses. In Chicago. Same principle, just the, I didn't do it.
That red light's on totally. Is that a new battery you said?
Brand new battery.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I hear you. Can everybody else hear you?
Is that sending you a message, Carol?
Huh?
Is that sending you a message?
Shut up. I'm just getting to the good part. But Fisk University has all the records from Mr. Rosenwald's foundation. He died in 1932, but his foundation continued until 48, when it ran out of money after spending $70 million. Now, $70 million in 1948 and 1920 and all that was a lot of money. But it ran out of money and funding in 1948. What I found interesting about this is that there were schools, Rosenwald schools, in Coffee County. They came here and built black schools in Coffee County. One of them used to be my mama's old office on the Carver campus. It is what's called the Material Center. Well, it was, yeah, at one time. But that was originally a Rosenwald school. The other one was Polk Elementary School. Billy Polk Jr. gave the land because Rosenwald was big on 50-50. You either had half the money or you had the labor and the property. You just didn't get it free gratis. Isn't that a double word? That's not right. That can't be right. Anyway, but Polk School was one. It is no longer in existence. And the other one was at Kirkland. It's no longer in existence. So we had a gentleman come through. For those of you who get the newsletter, you know this. There's a gentleman doing a book on Rosenwald schools, and he came by and took pictures and everything. It's going to be in the book. And now the Historical Society is getting money to put up a sign. We can't do the plaques because they cost way too much money. But we wanted to do a sign at that site because according to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the most endangered buildings in the United States are Rosenwald schools. There's some all throughout the state of Georgia have been turned into a community center or things like this, but most of them were wooden buildings. What happens to a wooden building? It goes away. It goes away. Also in this process, the local school authority had to promise to support and maintain financially the building. Once it was built, they had to keep it up. So that's just a little aside that I found out. In 1913, in the Douglas Enterprise, big article. Coffee County has a school within 3 miles of every student. So where they had been walking 4 to 5 miles to school, now they only had to walk at most 3. But that was a big plug for the school system. Every 3 miles there's a school. Teachers at this time had to enroll the student, keep up with absences and all that. But those kids that didn't get enrolled or wouldn't enroll, you had to keep going back and doing them. You had home visits you had to do every weekend. Okay? Now you've all seen those old lists of what teachers could do and couldn't do and all this. So on Sunday they couldn't do it. They could only go out to church, you know. But every month, and see this has been the killer for me in 1913. Every month, one Saturday a month, from 10 to 2, you had a meeting with the superintendent. Oh my God, how horrible could that be? 4 hours. I hardly survived one. What would I do with 4? School that year ran from November till the 1st of April. Then the county schools had a superintendent, but they had local school boards, and the president of the school board locally was the man there that everybody went to. Chain of command. In 1915, Coffee County saw a great influx of more people with the timber industry. West Green was built on that. The population of schools in West Green in 1 year tripled because of the people moving in. Oracle Roads were some of them. Those kind of people. They came in from Virginia and Tennessee and the Carolinas, and they just came. Of course, West Green had a big thing there where they were trying to sell land and farm demonstrations and all that. But anyway, it was an influx of people throughout the county. 1916, I just came across this and was flabbergasted. The police chiefs of Georgia had a meeting. Listen to compulsory education and free school books are our bulwark against crime and a remedy for storming the jails and lynchings of depraved human creatures. We failed. But not long after that speech, compulsory education was passed in the state of Georgia. And our first, they didn't call it truancy, they called it attendance back then, was J.H. Williams. I remember in school, no, when I was teaching in the 70s, we still had L.J. Harrell and Maxine Moore that would go to these houses and say, you've got to bring your youngest to school. And they still wouldn't. They were called truant officers during the day. And a lot of people did that kind of work, trying to get them in school. And now you can get them there, you just can't get them there on time. Or help them. But I just thought that was such a great way to solve all the world's problems, have free education and textbooks. Just make them be there. In 1920s, Georgia funded the Secondary Education Act. Cities, a lot of cities like Macon and places like that, had broadened their horizon, so to speak, with high schools and junior highs, those levels. But see, we were still 1 through 7 primarily. But this act gave us the power to vote for bonds. Like West Green could sell bonds and build a school. Broxton, Upton, whoever could do that. And that's what made them grow. West Green had you had to do a consolidated school district. They did it in 1925. And soon after, Ambrose, Nichols, and Broxton became a consolidated school system so they could do the bonds drives. West Green built a brick school in 1926. It was the first high school in Coffee County according to the Douglas Enterprise. But within 6 months, Ambrose, Broxton, and Nichols had one, and if you look at the old buildings, pictures and stuff, the same man built them. And a lot of the bricks at that time were locally made. So the first thing that they do is like this museum, they start crumbling. That's why very few I'm surprised Ambrose is still there and in such good shape. And I hope the city saves it because it belongs to them now. But anyway. Broxton and Nichols had voted to go out of the Coffee County system, remember, and become an independent school system. But in 27, Broxton went back to the county and Nichols went back to the county. This is fixing to be very important in the 30s. Because in 1929, there were 400 high school students in the county. And you had Ambrose, Broxton, Nichols, West Green high schools. Well, Satilla didn't have one when he did that. I'm looking at him like he knows everything because I think he does. But I know there were 4 high schools in the county at that time when they had 400 kids. Huh?
I think Satilla did too.
In 1930, something happened that I think was the best thing that happened to education in Coffee County. This is my personal viewpoint. E.M. Thompson became superintendent of the Coffee County school systems. When he took over, they had $40,000 worth of debt and $600 cash to run a school system a whole year. So what happened, the state pays for 6 months and then the county has to pay for the rest of the months. After 6 months, he closed the schools. Okay? Now, oh, that's terrible, close the schools, what are we going to do? You don't have any money to pay anybody. You don't have any money for heating. You don't have any money for anything. And you're already $40,000 in debt. But, in 1931, when they opened school back up, they were debt-free and ready to go because of E.M. Thompson and the people he garnered to help him and to push and to get things done. I remember Mr. Thompson. I don't know if y'all do or not, but I do. I remember him. I always thought he was such a quiet and little thing.
knows. But obviously, he had an iron steel, we'll see in just a minute. Even when the teachers didn't have school, the school board superintendent gave them a letter saying, this person, Linda Krebs, will receive such and such an amount when we get it. Okay? So this is what you would take to the store. Now this is where it gets dirty. Yeah. And the stores, if the chicken was $3, they're going to charge you $5. And they're going to give it on the savings account for you. But they're not going to do the $3, they're going to do the $5. It's called price gouging now. Same thing. But it was common all over the county because they didn't have any trust in the school system. In 1932, the school system was totally solid. No bills except monthlies or whatever. And he was superintendent until 1955. I don't know anywhere in the world we've ever had in Coffee County a superintendent for 23 years. First of all, he'd better run out on the rail by then, because it's all political now. 1938, West Green got a new black school. Papa Ray built the school, and Randall Newton and Fannie Newton were the teachers. Randall was the grandson of Ed Newton and the son of Flossie. If people know West Green history, you know those names. They went to school to be teachers in Cherokee schools because their mother was a half-breed. So they had an education in the Cherokee schools in North Carolina. And Randall had a library of over 300 books that the kids in the community just come get and borrow and bring back. He had lots of books. That's where Daddy would go to get his books to read. But Fannie taught later at Tanner. I call it Tanner, down at Millwood, where the Tanner plantation and all that stuff was. She taught there for several years. School in the 30s and 40s was different than even now. First of all, you walked, and I'll tell you a funny story. The West Green School, then and now, was less than a mile from my grandma's house. So Daddy and Uncle Doug would go to school. They'd walk home for lunch, and they'd be late getting back to class. And Papa fussed at them and said, you can walk it and back in 30 minutes and have time to eat. I'll show you. He missed it by 10 minutes. Daddy said that was the happiest he could be, but he never laughed at Papa. But they walked back and forth, or they had to take something. If you lived in town, you could walk, and if you didn't, you just took something. Or sometimes you just do without. Just do without. Buses were locally owned, and I don't mean the bus like you see on the streets today. I'm talking about a flatbed truck with canvas sides and wooden benches on the outside and 2 wooden benches on the inside, which was very economical because in the summertime when school was out, they took the benches out and they hauled back up to the market for everybody. And on Saturdays, if you get up early, I don't think I wrote his name down. T. Kirkland and Clint somebody, I can't remember. Clint Corson.
Clint Corson, thank you, Mom.
Yeah.
Clint Corson had a bus. They'd go to Douglas every Saturday morning and come home at dark, and you had to pay them a quarter. So that was the easiest way to get to town. Of course, you had to stay all day, which I thought was amazing because about this time, the Douglas Women's Club decided they needed public bathrooms in the city of Douglas because there were none. If you were in town all day, you didn't have a bathroom. But the Women's Club got public facilities put in around the courthouse so you could go to the bathroom. That's just a side issue.
It's important.
Yeah, very important. Growing up in a small community like West Green School, we had donkey basketball, womanless beauty pageants, Jim and Jesse and the Virginia Boys. You had talent night
Everybody would come and sing or dance or whatever. And you had a Halloween carnival. Remember when you could celebrate Halloween? Yeah, that was back in the dark ages. And everybody went because the school was the hub. The school was the hub. And somebody say, well, when we lost the high school. No, because I was there, there was no high school. It wasn't the high school, it was the parent involvement and it was the community involvement in the school. And my philosophy on this, and this is free, it doesn't cost you anything. When churches started building social halls, the community started dividing. It wasn't the schools losing their high school. It was churches going here for social events and these church people going there for this social event. They weren't all going to one place anymore. Makes a difference. West Spring had a clubhouse where everybody went for birthday parties, family reunions, after dinner church, all that kind of stuff. But some communities didn't. So if you splintered it, it goes. That's my soapbox. I'll get off. I'm sorry. I've heard stories from people that in the 30s and 40s, it was mostly recitation and plays. You'd order books from this company with a script. You'd put on the play. You do all this. And you'd get up and perform for people. I can't find anything else more frightening than that. At the age of 10, I just can't imagine doing that. But those are the kind of things they did. Everything was very local. Mr. Thompson also hit a windfall, kind of, after World War II. Because when Army has a surplus, they sell it. Got a lot of wooden buildings moved to Coffee County and on school property because of World War II surplus in Moultrie. West Spring got chairs for their new gym from the arsenal at East Point. I think he bought it by the pound. And I won't ever forget when Charlie Morgan was superintendent, he went to Columbus when they closed their library, backed up a truck and loaded up books. Then he brings me books to the high school library on tactical warfare, genocide, and all this, and wants me to improve my numbers. I did. I gained 10 pounds and threw out the books. So everything this you can buy cheap is not always good. In 1947, two things happened that made a big difference to teachers and students. If you entered the 8th grade in 1947, you had to go for 12th grade. Before that, it ended at 11. And for teachers, if you taught in the state of Georgia, you had to join TRS. Thank you, Jesus. So those are the two things that impacted education. Teachers had a retirement and somebody to kind of look after them, and kids got more education, whether they wanted it or not. At this time, by now, the schools that were built in the 20s are crumbling and falling apart. Bathrooms suck, lunchrooms suck, everything's bad. And Mr. Thompson, once again, came up with a brilliant idea in 1952 called consolidation. The difference was when he did it in the 50s, not the 80s, he did it, it worked. Voters voted for it 4-1. 4-1. The county would contribute $443,000, and the city joined the consolidation process, and they put in $129,000. That's about $600,000 that those two entities put in to build. Now, folks, we built. If you don't believe it, go to some of these elementary schools and look. They all look exactly alike. Everybody's. Coffee High School, the one they just tore down, was built. Carver was built. Broxton, Mary Hayes, Polk, East Side, West Side, and West Spring were all built in 1954. They moved in 55. different era. An example of the building process that's not always so sunny. West Green had grades 1 through 8. They had 220 students, 8 classrooms, a library, infirmary, teacher's lounge, storage, and restrooms, and grades 5 through 8 were to be departmentalized. Didn't happen. Didn't happen in my lifetime, or Joanne's, or anybody else's. They didn't have enough teachers to departmentalize 5, 6, 7, and 8. You had one teacher for the 8th grade. And she did it all. Okay? The other thing was, had a library. It was a big room, had bookshelves everywhere. There wasn't nothing in it. There were no library books. So Eleanor Lott was PTA president. She went to everybody's house in West Green to gather up books. When they got rid of some of the old ones, Mom and Daddy's name was in them, so I got them back. It's a Robin Hood book from 1930-something. You know, I got it back. But there was nothing there. A little known secret, when we moved into high school, before we moved in, they said, when are the lockers coming? And somebody said, what lockers? Well, we ordered them from the place that's going to do the kitchen equipment, and they said, what kitchen equipment? Some things fall through the crack. Somebody steps back on their shoes, and you don't do it. In this instance, they just didn't have money to do anything but build the building. Okay? The PTA furnished the lunchroom. The stove, the sinks, everything. And as an 8th grade student, I did 2 weeks rotation in the lunchroom, washing dishes and cleaning up. I tried to convince Daddy somebody else needed that free lunch better more than I did. I didn't do that work, but he thought it would teach me a lesson. I still don't like washing dishes. So, but it's a different world. It wasn't all good. It wasn't all bad. And this is just the highlights. There's a lot more we could do, but then y'all don't want to spend the night. So, are there any questions that I might can answer? Notice that tag.
Carol, what about the gym at West Green?
The gym was built in the 40s. It was made by the local people. The men in Douglas built it, and West Green built it. Who was the architect? R.L. Osteen designed it, and they made the brick and everything. It had a big grand opening. I think in that oral history of West Green book, there's an article from the newspaper about that gym and the grand opening and the speeches. And, oh, it was a big deal.
That was after the school built.
That was after, no, that was before 1954. It was built in the 40s because West Green had a fire.
Oh,
But it's still there, isn't it?
No, they tore it down. We're really good at tearing things down. We're excellent. Even the Polk school that they moved to West Side is gone. They tore that part down to put in a new gym or whatever it is back
what about the gym in Clarksville, the dome, not the dome, but the shell?
there. It was built when the high school was built.
Do you have any history on that too?
I have very little on Upton, just some elementary things, but I don't know, I haven't found who actually owned the land and gave it and all that kind of stuff. I'll tell you a funny story, well, ironic. Billy Polk Jr. gave the land for Polk School, and when they integrated and they closed Polk and moved it off, the old building was still there. And his grandson went to go through there. They had left desk, everything. They just walked out and left it as it was. And his granddaddy's picture was still hanging on the wall. And he brought it up here for me to see. And we're having a copy made for our museum of Mr. Polk. I mean, just... And I got an old school annual from Upton. It's an elementary annual. But I don't have... See, that'd be a good way for you to do some research.
Carol, my dad was born in 1903. He was taught He lived around West Green. He was born in Abbeville, but they back in West Green around Jeff Davis County. But he was taught Latin.
Yep.
He was taught cursive writing. He was taught geometry. He was taught algebra. And my brother went to med school, and my dad was helping my brother study his lesson. And Dad didn't go no further than 7th grade. So they had a heck of a good teacher.
They had some good teachers.
They done a heck of a job in education.
Friendship Elementary School, Friendship School in West Green is where the Kirklands had their sawmill. It's called Lehigh. It later moved to Baptist, Burkett Baptist and all that, but that was the first school in West Green. It was Friendship in 1873, 5, I don't remember, the early 1870s. But they did, because there's a little blurb in the paper about their Latin. See, it just depends on the caliber of teacher you get. So, it really did. At Garrett School, I know we have a picture of all the students, and they're all named, and there's an article that goes with it. Did I get it from you or from Raymond Heron?
Robert Raymond, I read.
But it talks about there's a Latin teacher, there's a home ec teacher, and there's all this other stuff. I don't know what home ec they were doing, because they didn't have no stoves or nothing, but sewing, probably, finger, that kind of stuff. But there was, it evolved very well. And it also depended on what you had. But Mr. Cromarty came with the train to West Green. He was a land developer. That's why his son-in-law owned so much later. But he brought people with him that could do all this stuff. It was just amazing. The people that had our story, let me go back, story. World War II happened. All the men went to war. Willie Pearl Davis coached basketball and everything else. And Papa sent Daddy to school in
Lumber City.
Lumber City, because West Green didn't have any real teachers. It was Miss Jones that had never taught, she taught, but she had never been to college or anything. But those are the kind of teachers they had. And he went there one year, and then the next year, when Uncle Doug was old enough to go to high school, Papa brought him back, and then they rode to high school in Douglas.
You know, you could teach after 2 years of college.
Yeah. Well, there's a retired educator in Atkinson County that has never been to college, and she taught 45 years.
Yeah.
Mother went 2 years out here.
Yeah.
Do you have anything on Rocky Pond School?
No, not a thing.
Now, Hazel Spivey might be able to tell you something about Upton.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
She's 100.
Hazel Spivey. Yeah, I know.
I think she's still pretty sharp. And Mama Mike can tell you she's sharper than 3 jacks.
I do have a little bit on Sunnyside School,
She taught it.
because 1L Sims, that's where she
Yeah.
went to school. 1L Vickers went to school at Sunnyside in Ambrose, at Ambrose.
Carol, well, how about Mary Hayes School in Broxton? That was built by the same time, Paul?
Yeah, in the
Kinda
in the
figured.
50s.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really built, it was fixed.
Fixed.
Instead of wood, it was brick. They put brick up by it,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
It's constructed.
Yeah, yes.
You mentioned all these smaller communities establishing high schools. When did Douglas get their first high school?
Douglas, they all did it in the 20s, because that's when you got funding for it. Now, you had higher grades, but a high school, like they had like through grade 9, but it was in the 20s, I believe, I don't remember. 28, it was in the 20s. They all got high schools about the same time, but Douglas had the facilities, and everybody else had to get them.
So the college was founded in 1906 as an A&M school, and if there weren't any high school graduates in Douglas, where do they get their students from?
Georgia Normal.
Okay.
Business class, business school. But South Georgia College
It was an A&E school.
it was an A&M
A&M school
school.
first.
You learned farming and building tobacco barns and all that. It wasn't what we consider a college today.
Right.
So it evolved also. Everything evolves, good, bad, and different. A lady from New York was here last week, she said there were 80 schools in Kaufman County in 1900. I said, honey, there was more than 80 schools. You better look at every little piss pot had a
Community.
school. Some of them you had one teacher because you only had 12 kids. Or you had 35 students and one teacher.
Well, Mother
It
said-
depends what somebody could afford to pay.
Rocky Point was a one-room school, and she taught
Yes.
every grade.
But see, I remember going to New Forest, the old New Forest school when I was younger. We'd go for girls' auxiliary campouts and things like that with the Baptist church at Sand Hill. And at,
Yeah.
that other Baptist church out that way.
Long Hill.
Central.
Long Hill's
And there were 4 rooms. There was a big room, 2 smaller rooms, and a long, narrow room in that New Forest school building. And it was wood. It had a big front porch on it and everything. I thought it was wonderful. But of course, it's rocky.
Before the 20s, if a student wanted to progress to college level, how did they?
They left.
They left.
They left.
Somewhere else?
They went somewhere else.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of them, if you look in the papers, like if you go to the Douglas Enterprise, in say even 1918, 1922, after the war, several of them from the Petersons, I can't remember their names now, they went to Macon school. They just went somewhere else and boarded or lived with family. Even during World War II, Eloise Urine, she was Eloise Minchie was there. She was sent north to school in Maryland during the war because they wanted her to have a decent education during the war. She married a man, married him, and came back home. But I mean, there was nothing for kids to go to boarding school. Well, Papa always said he wished he'd sent Daddy to a boarding school. It might have done him some good or something. But even, I remember in high school, Walter Jardine went to boarding school.
Yeah.
All of these too.
Yeah, a bunch of them left. It wasn't anything new, it's just what they were all used to. Especially if you had the money to do it. The rest of the time you had to work and save and scrimp, but you had enough to do more. But at that time also, you could do a lot with apprenticeships. We don't do that anymore. You didn't have to go to law school to be a lawyer. You could work with a lawyer for so many years. Mhm.
That's right, that's right. Can I say something?
Yeah.
Carol was talking about them walking 3 miles to school out in the county. We did in town too. I walked from Grady Avenue to the middle of Douglas, Georgia to school. We had no lunch rooms. I walked back to Grady Avenue. I had a bite to eat and I walked back to downtown Douglas. And when they got the soup kitchen, this was during World War II. When they got the soup kitchen, you could have soup and milk for 10 cents. That beat the heck out of walking home. So a lot of us ate up there. And then later on in high school, we, McCrae's Drugstore and Davis Pharmacy, you could get a Coca-Cola for a nickel and a hot dog for a dime. So 15-cent Coca-Cola and hot dog was better than the 10-cent milk and soup. But it still saved having to walk all the way downtown to school twice a day.
Back when my mama was first teaching at West Green, she said that there was the lunchroom
Yeah.
of some sort, but there wasn't any food. So it's whatever anybody brought, that's what they had for lunch.
That's what-
And Vera was
Yeah.
the cook, the cook,
Yeah.
Vera did, and she cooked what everybody brings, greens, beans, whatever.
I remember when I was in school in the 60s at West Grade, people would bring peas and butter beans to the lunchroom and corn. And that's what we would eat. Miss Vera would hand make caramel cakes, the best in the world. And then in the afternoon, when you got through, you dump all the leftover food in a bucket, and Mr. T. Kirkland would come get it and feed his hogs. They even had cans, they call them slop cans, hanging on the post at people's houses in Douglas. And the slop wagon would come along and collect all the leftovers to feed their hogs.
These are
You
good.
can't feed them all on a lot to hogs now.
No, you know, they'd shoot you if you tried to do that.
Ooh, them some rank, strong hogs that eat slop.
But Carol's mother taught my daddy at West Green. And he always would tease her that she had to be old because she was so much older. At that time, she wasn't that much older than they were.
Well, at 2 years of college, Mama taught so like Lige Lott, she was
Yeah.
about the same age.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Mother
Carol's
taught some
aunt was
just
my
a year ago.
librarian when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And her mama was my neighbor.
Anybody else got a question or comment?
Mother was principal of the West Green School for a short time.
Right.
I think an interim,
Yeah.
something for a short time.
Yes, she was.
And Aubrey Williams was principal, what, after, at some point, I
Right.
Carol, Mama tells the story, in fact, this is back in the probably mid-30s or so, when she was about second, third grade or so. She was always the first one in West Green School. So she had to light the fire, get the fire going. This little,
We had a pile of coal out there in the yard, and somebody had to get the coal and start burning.
There was a fire in the West Spring School in the early 40s, because the men were all working down at the port, building ships and all that stuff. And the stoves would get so hot, and they weren't ventilated correctly, and the embers got in and burned the school down. And everybody said, whoa, no more school, no more school. But whoa, the Baptist church and the Methodist church filled the hole. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank y'all for coming. Please.